Welcome to OneLegUp, where we discuss how you can deliver the very best customer experience and how you can achieve zero marketing waste. I'm Ed Davis, the Chief Operations Ninja here at OneLeg, and I'm back and joined as usual by Vic Sun, our mastermind. Vic, how are you?
Good, just like you. I've been very, very busy. I'm glad you're back.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
You were never away from our organization. It's just we've been so
That's
busy the last couple of months that you've been
well,
doing a
I
lot of other things.
yeah. Well, for those that listen on a regular basis, as Vic has alluded to, it has been about a month since I've been on the podcast, and in that time, Vic and a couple people from our tech team explored the nuances of lead perfection and 5.9 integrations. And the nice thing that's come out of that, Vic, I think, is we're going to utilize those sessions as a jumping off point for sort of a, what would you call it, a sub series of our podcast that's going to focus specifically on some of the technology offerings that we have here at OneLeg. So that's sort of a cool little outcome of why, since I've been away. And I'd say that's also a nice transition into what we want to talk about today, which is quality versus quantity. And there's a debate obviously around quality versus quantity that penetrates every facet of sales and marketing, whether that's social media and content and post, all the way through to sales leads, which is where it rears its head the most for us and our clients. And so I thought it'd be good for us to have a conversation about that here and maybe discuss some of the nuances of quality versus quantity. I know you've got it in your head, maybe it's a little bit of a debate because, within our own organization, we haven't quite come to grips with, where we're at. I think we typically fall in line with the quantity, or excuse me, the quality aspect of that argument. But as we were talking about as a group last week, you know, we do believe that there is benefit to both. It's just in how you operationalize those things. So I think it's safe to say, Vic, by and large, most of our clients are looking for volume in most of their sales and marketing activities. Would you agree?
I do, and I think it's very evident when we do the process of auditing, what they currently have, that's really what they're all about, and that's really the to be honest with you, the cause of their issues and conversion is because once you start looking at quantity, like lead generation, for example, more, then you start to look at everything else. Like we've partnered with Hatch a couple of times in certain projects and marketing, and even in the last debate that we've done, and overwhelmingly, I would say 100% of the people that have come to us had the same issue. They would have 18 emails as follow-ups to people, and then we'd look at the numbers and we go, well, how many people, how effective was your first email or your text, your text
Sure.
rather, for Hatch? And it was like, oh, it's at 15%. It's like, okay, it was 85% of people ignore it. Why do you even have 17 more? But again, it becomes that becomes their personality. You know what I mean? It becomes who they are, right? When you start talking about lead generation and more quantity, and for you, you've always worked with big companies, big brands, B2B, and it's kind of moving towards that now for customer experience. But what do you think has been the biggest surprise that you've had in the beginning when you've started to go and see how improving companies work in terms of their marketing and sales?
Well, I think just it's a weird thing to say, but I think the ease at which leads technically can be generated within this industry, right? So, you look at some of the tactics that our clients or just the industry in general employs. They use lead aggregators, they use canvassing, they use sweepstakes on social media and whatnot, and all of these things are designed to not necessarily look at it's trying to aggregate mass information, mass form fills and things along those lines. And I think in some instances, that's really a foreign concept to me, because when I think about it from a business to business standpoint, which is obviously my background, you know, those sales cycles are typically measured in months, if not years. Whereas in the home improvement space, as we affectionately talked about during the Hatch debate, those sales cycles are essentially measured in minutes and hours, right? With a one call close. And you and I have laughed about, my experience with an HVAC company when I had to get one of my air conditioning units replaced. And it was clear that I started asking too many questions. And the guy flat out said, I don't have time to answer all of your questions, so I'm going to go on to the next lead. Right? I was totally ready to buy, but because it wasn't going to be, ticking a box and sending an invoice and scheduling the repair, well, that was just too much work for him. And I think, we've talked about this before. In B2B, you certainly look at macroeconomic factors. I've done a lot of work in oil and gas, and you'll look at the price of oil, and that'll determine, how the industry as a whole is going. I honestly don't think that home improvement companies at the local level, the neighborhood level, I mean, tell me differently. I don't know that they look at the macroeconomic factors that are impacting their business. They might look at the local community factors, but they're not looking at, where's my supply, where are the materials, what's going on with inflation and all of these things. And I think some owners are getting a big dose of why they do need to be considering that, because that does impact their lead generation activities, which gets us into, really, do you want a volume of leads, because then it's just a numbers game, or do you want to, as we're starting to see with some of our clients, yeah, I don't care if I get 100 leads this week. I just need 5 really solid leads, and I can work those.
Yeah. And I think just for the definition, even for us, our lead is more of an appointment or a demo.
Sure.
And I think that's where it gets confusing for some of the clients who, when we start speaking to them and we say, well, you don't need more leads. Once we do the audit and we figure that out, and we say, well, you want is appointments and demos, and they still think, well, can I still get the 200 plus leads this month? Is that what you're giving? And the answer is no, because if you look at the appointments and demos, you're only converting on 5 to 10% of those in those low intent channels. And so we're saying, well, our goal is to get you 20%, but it's still a lower number than 200, right?
Right.
And that's a big disconnect, because in this and it's not a surprise that a lot of companies don't have time or don't want to talk about those things, because they're just not used to it, right? In this space, it's really about, well, how many people submitted a form, and they get caught up in that, and because they've been used to that, and they know a specific number of conversions, get 100 forms today, I'll convert on, anywhere between 10 to 30% of those, and then the other ones, my call center will just keep hounding them, and if I've got texts or emails, right? Whereas it's really just applying in a different fashion with quality, where you go and say, well, out of 100, I'm really only demoing, or I'm really only seeing 20 people. And when you start talking about, well, let's go and do this program, and you get 25, it gets very scary for them, because 25 is less than 100,
Right.
right? And I think that's the main crutch of many companies, which we end up saying, well, we're not for you, because you're most companies in home improvement, I would say, especially the ones that are fairly successful, that's been around for a while, they know how to lead gen. Most companies know how to
Right.
generate a lead. Like you said, it's easy to do that. What is troubling to me is and to our organization, is when we come in and they start coming up with, hey, I still have a lot of lead, I want more. And then you start seeing their conversion, and it's like going down on this downward spiral, and they don't address that. They still think lead generation is the
The
cure,
answer.
right? This
Yep.
they're addicted to leads, addicted to collecting names and numbers. And it's funny in macro and microeconomic factors, and they start, companies, we've talked to a couple of companies in just the last few weeks, where they can't hire call center people, and then they can't seem to overcome that right now, and they still want to be able to hound people and process their leads for their call center when they can't even grow their own call center because of the issues right now of hiring, right? And so again, I think it's really an interesting, very debatable, topic. And one thing I was going to ask you is, for the B2B, that seems to be kind of like a really great strategy right now, even for D2C companies or B2C companies, that they've started to realize, well, if I'm ever going to compete and there's a lot of competition in my backyard or for this particular service, I need to be able to go and nurture the lead. I need to go and provide good content, nudge them in the right direction. And I'm going to put context into this. With home improvement, roofing jobs, kitchen, bathrooms, you're talking about the price of sometimes as expensive as a good luxury vehicle, right? It
Sure.
can be anywhere between 70 to $150,000, right?
For a full on
And maybe
remodel.
even,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, for a full on remodel. For solar and for roofing, you're looking at $20,000 to $40,000, for example, depending on the type of material. But you're not talking about a small little purchase here. So, what is, in your opinion, why is it that with just like buying cars, for example, you're averaging $50,000 to $60,000, for example, people are thinking about that for a few months, or doing their research, or going to different places, and that is now starting to evolve, especially with the Tesla model of selling things, where you kind of order things and the
Right.
brand, and that's all the information's up front, being front loaded. What do you think, in your opinion, in home improvement, why have they not caught up to that?
Well, I think a lot of it is going to be previous behavior, right? It's habit. We're not used to it, and I think the other bit, the other sort of big driving factor of it is behavior, not just on the home improvement owner or the company is under change, or the threat of change. So is the consumer behavior, right? It was the last vehicle I bought, never stepped foot inside the showroom until I was ready to actually go and purchase the vehicle. And I was actually, and it was at that time that I did the test drive. But I did, to your point, I did all my research. I was communicating with the salesperson over text and over email about what I was looking for. Do you have it? Can you get it in this color? Can you do that? And that is just a complete, you've got 100 years of experience of how people buy things, and the pandemic and the last half a decade have radically changed how we look at it. Think about this. If you go to the standpoint of Amazon has conditioned us to, everybody used to do mail order stuff. That's not new. Sears built their business on mail order everything under the sun. What Amazon did was change the dynamic between, well, yes, I can order something, and instead of having to wait 4, 5, 6 weeks before I get it, well, in some instances, I can get it the same day now from Amazon, like legitimate stuff that you would have waited weeks for, right? And so now that I think that's the other bit that the home improvement industry has to really come to understand, and it factors into the quantity versus quality conversation. Well, now as a consumer, I'm willing to engage you in this sort of rapid fire motion. I'm compressing the sales timeline, at least what I'm comfortable with, right? Home improvement owners have always wanted quicker sales cycle than maybe the homeowner is going to want to do, but we're coming around to that. But what you have to give to me is, I need better quality information. I need a better quality experience. I don't necessarily need you, and we're seeing a lot of our clients really come to grips with this. I don't necessarily need you to come into my home now and do your presentation. Don't need it. Why can't we do this? Right?
Yeah, and it's because there's this crutch of, well, look, in order for you to automate all these things and provide it, I remember last year there was this company that said, well, we tried that where it's a window company. So, okay, we have that where people could put in their sizes and stuff like that. Never work. People, and then you look at their website, it was like, looked like it was built in
Right.
1996, and their marketing material and none of the information help with the brand or the image of the company, but the technology was there. And they couldn't marry that. To them, it's just like, well, that what else do you want? You could put in your measurements, it pops out a price. Why can't people just buy? Well, it's the same thing as anything else. People want to see, the content, the creative. It has to be emotional. It has to meet the value and the price,
Yeah.
kind of these questions. And to a lot of companies, I think one of the biggest thing is, how do you address quality? And this is the biggest thing that we're getting challenged with those people who say quantity, quantity, quantity is, and even for myself, it's like, okay, well, if we can't get the right creative and the content, you kind of dispel that by having some of the quantity, and hopefully somewhere within the numbers,
Right.
right, you'll of images or videos that you have, you'll get one, which is this numbers game theory. But how do you address the quality side if you really don't invest in quality content and creative? Like, how do you,
Well, you'll appreciate this, and then you might sort of suck it up a little bit. I think owners are going to be forced to address it, right? We can only say so much, but I think what's going to bear out over the course of the next 18 months or so is the changes to Google and how they rank websites and businesses. It is skewing far more towards that quality argument than it is the quantity, right? Google is starting to care less and less about how many keywords you have in your meta tags, how many pay per click ads that you have, how many pieces, how much volume of content that you're actually putting out. What they're more concerned about is your content actually addressing what people are actually searching for? And then when they come to you, do they have a quality experience in terms of interaction with you? And so to your point about some of these home improvement company owners who have websites from 15 years ago that essentially says, this is my company, here's a picture of a window or a door or a roof, here's my phone number 15 times on the website just in case you didn't know where to call. As you know, I'm fond of saying, the market is going to do its job, and you are not going to be in business. You're just not. You're not going to be able to compete. Google is going to drive traffic, is going to drive sales to your competitors or to others who do it better. And you're going to sit there and you're going to wake up 2 years from now and you're going to go, what the hell happened? In the pandemic, I had this fantastic business. And now the economy's come back around and I have no business. It's because you weren't paying attention. You weren't paying attention to what your customers want. You weren't paying attention to what big tech is driving the world into, and the world left you behind. So it's not really about what Ed or OneLeg or Vic is going to tell customers. I mean, we can say all of those things. I think some of them don't necessarily believe us, right? Because they're sort of old school and they've had their businesses for 15, 20, 25 years. And that's a big, bitter pill to swallow. But it's reality. And you know that I've talked about this, and we've been in potential client meetings where you're looking at their business and you're like, I hate to say it, but you don't deserve our help, because you're making bad business decisions. You're making bad marketing decisions. You're making bad sales decisions. You don't deserve our help.
and I think it's the core issue there is really, people are willing to invest in leads. And I remember after the debate there was this very spirited owner, or maybe he was, I think he was actually a VP in the
Yeah.
company rather than the owner. And he's writing me emails and emails, long ones. And I was trying to just, respond back and just be like, okay, well, this is a nice little way to go and kind of, have a nice passionate discourse via email. Like, we were like pen pals for a little bit there. And then I said, well, I can't convince you because you're clearly about this issue here, but these are some things to consider. And in the end, he wrote me a really long email, and that was the last email because I didn't feel like I should respond anymore. It was kind of like, I'm not going to convince you of anything. But he asked, well, do you work on performance? Which is really code for, can you help me generate leads? And when you generate them, I'll pay you when you
Sure.
generate them. And that wasn't the issue, right? The issue still eluded, this person and their organization, that the reason you're experiencing this is because you do have leads, but you can't convert. And when you look at their website, like, I went through and submitted tested their system, so to speak, and you didn't get an email or a text that was worth anything, that, there was no videos about the product or the service or the company. You couldn't find them on social media to make it engaging enough for me and say, this is really interesting. And so I think that the true debate here is, if you could prove, with quality content and creative and investing in that, right, and investing in the images and the videos, will people still, with the data, go and say, yeah, I'll do that? Because in my experience, as well as, many people, data doesn't seem to be the behavioral um, impetus for them to go and say, hey, this is the thing. Like, people go to, like, I've said this before, I've used an example. People go to Panda Express and they love Panda Express, and they see that there's like 1,000 calories of this orange chicken, and people like, delicious, give me 2 servings of that. And it doesn't stop them, even though it's right there staring them in the face, that the calorie count, it's bad for you. Information and data does not move people's behavior. And I do, even though, like, begrudgingly, I don't like what you just said, it is true. The market is going to kill off those
Yep.
companies, or because, like you said, from last year, there's all these new startups that have popped up and said, hey, the pandemic has caused me to make a shift and I have a new model of
Yep.
business, and this is how it is. And some of them are younger owners and more forward thinking ones, and the tech industry is moving to acclimatize, consumers towards a specific behavioral model. And I believe that home improvement, despite it dodging that bullet for a really long time, now with the pandemic and half the population not wanting the traditional way of spending 9 hours of 3 companies coming into their
Yep.
home and measuring,
That's
and
right.
this, that's changed the dynamic. And so now your decision is, since I can't go back to 2019, lead generation, and enjoy those metrics, do I start investing in my content, my creative, my brand, or I just wait it out, do the exact same thing, and just hope,
You're the
that
last one
a new
standing.
startup. Yeah, and there's a lot of private equity now buying a lot of companies because they're trying to streamline the way that the customer experience is under one brand, because they believe, like, private equity and these hedge fund guys, they're very smart. They know they can consolidate this, provide a better experience, slap on better technology, and there you go, right? You've gotten like another Uber displacing the taxi industry. And I think that's going to happen with home improvement. Now, with home improvement, I think the one thing that it has as a, and this is me kind of future, as a futurist type, is thinking there's going to be companies who are still local, who kind of service a state or maybe several cities within a state, that if they start their branding efforts now, the content, the creative, no Uber will displace them, because people do like the sense of, here's a community and that company is well trusted, and they're in the state, or they service my, they've been around for a while. But I do believe that it's coming. There is going to be this reckoning where new companies, startups, technology companies that start to eat up into the space will start displacing even the biggest companies who've been around for 20, 30 years.
Yeah, I don't know about that, because history says that's not how the world works. Right? There's always consolidation. You will go through these periods where, you have a handful of players, people sort of figure it out, and there's this explosion of a number of companies, but then those companies start to eat each other, right? You're seeing it right now in oil and gas. You're starting to see it a little bit in home development companies, but historically you've seen it in things like airlines and railroads and stuff like that, right? Car companies. Think about this. In reality, if you went back to the 1920s, the 1930s, you literally in the United States had something like 75, 85 different car companies, right? And some of them were literally they built 15 cars in Indianapolis. You don't have that anymore, right? You effectively have what, four? You've got Chrysler, you've got Ford, you got Chevrolet, you've got Toyota, you've got Honda. So five. You got five major global brands. Now they all have sub brands, but I think, to your point, I think that's probably where home improvement is going. And again, from that standpoint, it is a numbers game, right? Those companies are eating up these little bitty providers, because essentially what they see coming down the pike is there's this world where I'm going to be able to service a bigger audience. So it's the reverse, right? I'm going to be able to service a bigger audience by having a solidified brand. And I'm going to be able to ensure a quality experience, because just like you would see in like a Chick-fil-A or any other franchisable business, I'm going to dictate and make sure the experience is the same no matter where you're engaging me from. And I think in some cases, in some instances, that's going to be a really good thing for the market. But like I said, it's one of my rare sort of Republican free market sort of uh, bits about me. Yeah, I absolutely believe in markets doing what markets are designed to do. And if you have poorly structured your business, you've not kept up with technology, you've not kept up with your customers and what they're looking for and how they want to engage you. Yeah, I don't feel bad when you go away. I feel bad for the people for sure, but I don't feel bad for the brand.
And I think there's also the back end of this, which is, sales traditionally in home improvement, it's here's the leads. Marketing team usually handles that lead generation. Then it's passed through the call center. The call center now works with sales managers or within their call center management, and then the leads are issued to salespeople, and the salespeople perform demo,
Yep.
right, or the presentation, a pitch, however you want to call it. And and this reliance on this model, where really you're trying to get, and this is another issue, right? Scaling a sales team is finding salespeople, and talented ones at that, to be able to go and do um, sales presentations and call close in every single one, despite the channel. This violent vicious cycle that's causing a lot of companies from the front end to the back end to kind of stick with the lead generation, the quantity
Sure.
model. Because in their minds, it's like, well, I just need to produce more and more leads and give, because if one salesperson has to run 10 leads and I've got 10 now, I've got to have 100 appointments a week. And if I don't get 100 appointments a week, then, I can't feed my salespeople and I can't get to the 20 sales
Right.
this week that I'm going to be doing.
But as you
But
and I have
really,
talked about, that to me is like a junkie, right? You and I've had this conversation. That is and I don't I, I of course understand the gravity of that statement of comparing it to a drug dealer sort of junkie scenario. But in my mind, that's essentially what it is, right? Your lead aggregators, some of these unscrupulous marketing companies, essentially what they sell these home improvement companies on is, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I know you used to get 2 deals out of 10 leads, but oh yeah, blah 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 blah. Don't worry, we can give you 15 leads now, and you'll still get your 2 deals. And so the numbers just continue to grow, and you're constantly chasing more and more numbers to essentially get the same result. And the only people who are winning in this, and it's not something you probably could do a whole other show on this. It's those marketing companies, those lead aggregator companies. They're the ones who win in the quantity debate. They don't win in the quality debate, right? Because, well, I can charge you $10. It's $10. Who cares?
Yeah, the true test of this really, and for our audience who wants to listen, is you want to figure out just how much you're on the lead generation side as opposed to the conversion. Is just do this. Like, if the lead generation is traditional, right? You just produce the names and the numbers, and you must have a call center agent confirm and set the appointment. Now, if you test it for just 2 weeks, where you go and do a program where the same questions are being done through a landing page or through a chat or through a text with that and conversational AI, we've done this through our bots, for example. And if you don't have that, then just put it on a landing page where your form's kind of a dynamic one where it asks those questions. I will bet, $100 versus your $10 that you will get the same conversion, if not better, because really this reliance on that, and then you'll figure out like, maybe I don't need more leads. Maybe I'm just stuck in this cycle, right? Because we've met people like that.
Yep.
We said, look, don't worry about the call center person. We're scheduling appointments. We're not producing leads for you. We're producing appointments. But then they go, well, I have to have somebody call and talk to them. It's like, what are you going to talk to them? And then nothing about that was about quality. It was just about this feeling of control.
Correct.
Which I think maybe that's the whole thing about quantities, because you can control. It's very easy to control quantity. Spend more, put more,
Sure.
bigger money on media buy, do more emails, do more texts, do more calls, do more follow ups. The quality is tougher because you need actual experts, creatives,
Well,
artists, people
you
who,
need patience.
patience. Yeah, because you figure things out. You do surveys. You try to figure out who the whereas the quantity you don't need to. It's really the lazier route, right? You basically go, I'm going to just dump as many of these emails, texts, calls on the market, right? And that person, the user, the buyer can bear until they say, stop calling me, put me on a DNC or whatever.
Right.
And and some companies are actually doing this, which, like the consent-based marketing. I know a couple of companies who kind of do that. But I think what happens is they don't really focus a lot on, like, you get the consent, you get the here's the consent of me, but then whatever you give them is still the same. It's still crappy, right? It's still not the wow, this is really engaging. This is a nice video. This is a brand video. This is a nice product imagery and those sort of things. So I think, this is something that really, I think in the next 18 months, how do you how do you convince, how do you persuade, how do you inspire owners to go and say, you've been investing on lead generation, you should invest in lead conversion, and it's with content and it's creative. And I think for our next thing, I was just thinking about, how do you beat the attribution, that vicious cycle of attribution? Because the other challenge is, if you're going to go and argue for quality, how do you attribute that?
Sure.
You can't put that neatly into a field, into an Excel spreadsheet.
Nope. Well, you potentially can, but it's a lot more work, right? And so it's a lot more investment in your time. It's a lot more investment on your activities. It's a lot more investment of your business into thoughtfully thinking through what exactly you're doing, rather than, as we've talked about here today, email blast, text blast, advertising. Like, I'm just gonna blast everything. I've got a shotgun. I'm gonna shoot every which way direction. And what we're talking about here is, if you have the patience for it, if you have the stomach for it, if you have the temerity for it, being methodical, thoughtful, and constantly testing, constantly honing in, constantly refining, constantly evolving what it is that you're saying, how you're targeting, and how you're engaging your customers. In the long run, that's a business that will outlive you, the owner. Like that's a bankable business that can be generational.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing that I've started to learn as well as we get challenged with these things that people are not used to, attribution, the vicious sales cycle, and their current model of actually generating revenue. Um, it really means, and I learned this actually from one of the home improvement seminars that I went through in sales, and somebody said, well, the best ideas are usually the ones that get the most objections to it.
Hmm.
That's the best. Those are usually the best ideas. You can measure it with the amount of objections and kind of the rejection that you get from the very beginning, because it's such a strong concept. It's such a good idea. And I was telling you about this. I was watching Mad Men. I finally finished it. And in the end, I was like, the ending was like kind of, if you have not seen Mad Men, there's like this
Spoiler
whole thing
alert!
about
Spoiler
Coke.
alert!
Spoiler alert. Yeah, it's on Amazon. But this whole this ad campaign about, I want to buy the world of Coke. And I'm not from that generation, but I've heard of it and I've known that song. You know what I mean? And it was like, literally, like, how could you attribute that? How could you even? But that is one of, like, that's like Hall of Fame. That put Coke in the map in other places in the world, and people hum that song from here to places in the world that maybe didn't even have Coke. And to me, that was just like, that's what humans are. Even with the Amazon model, they hit on the emotional side. You just need to know about it. Netflix does the same thing. The big companies, Amazon, Apple, right, Google, Tesla, they get you on these on the personalization and the creative and the content that really drives home that all you really have to do at that point is just make a decision on what color you want.
Well,
You know what I mean? That's really what it is. And I think for home improvement, this is the part right there, at least for the home improvement customers that we have. That's going to be a big challenge. I think a lot of other industries are starting to catch on much quicker than home
yep.
improvement, but I'd really like to see home improvement catch up, just as
I
much.
agree. Well, that's it for us today. We hope you've enjoyed our chat and learned a couple things. As always, we here at One Leg believe poor marketing pollutes the planet, and that business is full of tired, outdated, indistinct, unremarkable, and underperforming marketing that sucks. But what sucks even more is that many companies have forgotten the most important thing of all, the customer. And we're on a mission on behalf of our clients' customers to change that. To learn more, go to zeromarketingwaste.com, where you can subscribe to this very podcast. And you can also find us and follow us by looking for the flamingo and the One Leg handle wherever you socialize online. Thank you. See you next time.